Whatever the life is that you want to lead, it's going to cost you money. Reality is, if I want to retire at 55 and I want to travel a month of that, I'm going to need to think about that. There are certain big life events that may or may not happen that you can define as a goal. I'll use the kids example. The average cost of having a kid in the UK is £223,000. You're planning to have 5 kids. That's a reality check. That's over $1 million that you're going to need.
And actually, it's really interesting. If you have a financial plan, you're 43% more likely to achieve those goals. I'm going to challenge everyone to say, don't think about the year as a year. Break it down. Why? Because it adds a level of urgency. If you're like, I've got a year to save £5,000, you're suddenly going to be like, oh, I've got ages. The other thing we say also is let people know what your goals are.
There is actually research that says if you've shared your savings goals, you are more likely to achieve them.
You're not defined by where you come from.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big message that I always want to tell people. Like
you have to be able to be uncomfortable. Like be comfortable with being uncomfortable. When you grow up in ends, you don't realise it when you're confident, but you have an audacity to do things that ordinarily most people wouldn't be willing to do.
Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Atto. We have special guests in the building. We have Elisabeth and Nitika, who are the co-founders of Aila Money, which is a fintech company on a mission to close the wealth gap. They leverage data, behavioral science, and human experts to help women achieve their goals and dreams. They have over 30 years experience in the financial service sector, and that's combined experience. How are you both doing today?
Very well, and thank you for not aging us.
Yes. How did that sound actually when I was saying not combined?
Well, it was this moment of like, I probably would have been like, hey, time out.
Okay, I'll start with you, Elisabeth. Who's Elisabeth?
So at the core, very deep down inside, I am German. So if I'm ever direct and all of that, then that's where it comes from.
Okay.
But no, cool. I have, as you say, a fair amount of experience in financial services. I started out in the life and pension space and then moved into private banking. Realised in life and pensions how rubbish we were when it came to our long-term finances. And then in private banking, just how much, I don't know, guidance, advice, education, etc. was literally chucked at the wealthy, and also how women weren't entirely treated the same. I then decided to get out of corporate, so I went into a boutique strategy firm and then found myself co-founding Aila Money.
Okay, awesome.
Oh, and I should say we're university friends from way back when.
University friends as well. Yeah. How long have you known each other for?
20-ish
Yeah.
years.
Wow.
Now you are really aging us.
No, it can't quite be true because we only would have started uni next year. So it's probably like coming up on 20.
Okay, wow. That's a long time. Good friendship, and to be able to start a business together as well. That's amazing. Yeah.
I always say our first joint project was a hen do.
Yeah.
And
if we can survive that, then we can survive having a business.
Absolutely.
What about yourself, Nitika? Who is Nitika?
So background wise, I think you mentioned, so I have over 16 years in financial services, but who Nitika is at the core is actually a daughter of immigrants who has first generation gone to university and then ended up in investment banking because of my love of maths, really, because I was a bit of a geek.
Okay.
And then found myself going through investment banking and then entering the world of hedge funds, where I've had multiple roles. And again, like with Liz, I got to see just how much information the wealthy have and how different the conversations are about money, investments in that sphere, in a way that was never the case when I was growing up in my family or with any of my friends. So there's barely anything to save, let alone think about what you do with that saving. So I loved seeing this world, but it also blew my mind just how much information and the conversations that weren't being had elsewhere.
Yeah.
Whilst I was working at a hedge fund, I also then started doing a counselling course and volunteering at mental health charities.
Okay. That's
Here I then saw the problem, not just how we saw with potentially how people were talking about money being different, but I just saw it to the other extreme of how much people struggled with their finances.
Yeah.
And especially through COVID, how it led them to be in situations that they didn't want to be in and couldn't leave. And that came to be some of the passion that we saw and some of the reason we have set up Aila Money.
Okay, yeah, can you talk a bit more about that, like the motivation to want to help people, you know, with their money and their finances?
Yeah, so I think leading on to that, so I saw it at a problem at the extremes, helping at charities, but then we actually also saw it with our friends. So Liz and I have always been very honest with our conversations about money because we at one point worked at the same bank and had similar cycles. So we were very open and honest about, right, okay, bonus time, what are you doing? You're buying a house, I'm buying a house. How does this look?
That's a good conversation to have.
Well, buying a flat, but similar thing for both of us.
And I think it sort of really consolidated. I had kids, and at one point when you have kids, things get really real. And I remember phoning you up being like, okay, right, so if something happens to me and my partner, I need, and my parents and his parents on there, somebody's going to need to look after things. I want you to be that person.
Okay.
Right? And that's sort of...
Wow.
where the friendship, that's the friendship side of things.
That's the friendship side.
Okay.
But we noticed our friends weren't having those conversations. And actually we both became very passionate of, and some would say pushy, in passing on some of the information we had learnt. And we realised that it wasn't just our friends that didn't have a confidence when it came to their finances, investing. This was a larger problem. And we then ended up looking into it and getting very passionate about it. And, you know, one of the stats that we absolutely hate is the gender wealth gap currently stands to be 7 generations.
Wow.
That's over 160 years it will take to level up.
So for me, think about, that's not your daughter. That's not your granddaughter.
That's great.
That's 5 greats before you can say granddaughter. That's if nothing changes. So that's insane. And I think we obviously looked at the sort of micro problem of our friends and then started to look outwards. And, you know, there's stats like women who earn £75,000, which is a fair amount. By not investing, they lose out on over £800,000 throughout their career. This is just opportunity cost foregone because of not doing something. And then there's all of these stats around, like, you know, 90% of women plus feel or know they need to do something about their finances, but actually less than 3 out of 10 feel empowered to actually do something. So it's just it's a glaring problem, and pretty much all the stats tell you, right? It's like there's the gender pay gap and the gender investing gap and the gender pension gap. And so I think we've just sort of gone, all right, this is a big problem that needs tackling. And in part it's because the industry perhaps hasn't served women in a way. And in part it's because, you know, there is a moment of women are getting better education. They're getting the bigger jobs. They're getting the bigger pay rise or the bigger paychecks, right? Like they're making all of these great decisions and great successes and inroads. But for some reason, we're still not able to sort of translate that into, okay, but what am I doing with my money now?
And I think Liz has mentioned it. Like there is a two-sided approach, and some of the industry hasn't helped in this. So only 16% of financial advisors are women. So
it's low,
It's so low.
Yeah.
So women didn't feel that they were heard or spoke to in the right way. And less than 50% of women in the UK pass a basic literacy test. And so there is just stuff that can be done on both sides to try and help this.
Wow. I mean, that's a huge gap, actually. The 16% one is fascinating because I guess you could say that if it's 16%, that's what, 84% on the other side, right? Like, you know, like you say, maybe not relatable in a way, maybe don't understand certain, let's say, conversations. Because when with money and men, let's say, I think we're just quite comfortable talking about what we earn, talking about buying a property, some stuff like that at times. I think sometimes we can. Investing's an interesting one because I feel like investing is very male dominated. Like it's not, I mean, I don't see a lot of women talking about it. It's the truth, right?
A lot of this comes from stereotypes, right? So whether it is the men feel more comfortable talking about money, you know what? Actually, when it comes to budgeting and keeping on track, women are known to be so much better than men at this.
Yeah.
But then when you think about long-term finances, society has put it to the stage that women deal with short-term finances, men deal with the longer term.
That's interesting.
Call it small versus large. And I think what's fascinating is if you actually, and you're never going to look at a banking advertisement again after this, right? So if you look at how banks portray women versus men in their ads, the women are always sat there with, in sort of, I don't know, a sweater, and it's comfortable, and they're, hugging a cup of tea or a hot chocolate, and there's pennies or a piggy bank.
Okay.
Which is small money, right? It's nothing grows in a piggy bank, and it's very sort of, the men are the notes and the graphs. They're wearing glasses. They're in suits, and it's this, you're just stereotyping within those images because a woman doesn't see herself in a man, and a man doesn't see himself in a woman, and that's it's okay, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean one or the other.
Interesting.
But you grow up with those, and where you mentioned the investing, women are growing up being told, oh, women are more risk averse. Investing isn't for women because it's very risky. You could lose everything. So suddenly women are told, one, you're risk averse, which isn't necessarily the case.
Yeah.
And also then they're told, oh, it's not for you because you're going to lose everything. And you don't think about long term. You deal with the short term.
That's interesting.
I think there's also, and if I may just give you a really concrete example of where it's very hard to relate to people who are not you.
Yeah.
Right? Your experiences. So I also don't think there is a conscious effort to say, we've built an industry and we're trying to keep people out. I just think it's been designed for the people who built it, right? And they obviously can't relate. So a concrete example, a friend of mine, single mother, right? Baby in stomach, phones her advisor, a guy, and says, I'm debating getting a bigger house because I have a baby and I need, and he looks at her, money and income and goes, you can absolutely do that. No problem whatsoever. You can get the bigger mortgage. It's not going to be a problem. She would have been max to the hilt, right? Like she would have been really in the rat race kind of thing. And she was smart enough to go, let me talk to somebody else. And she found another woman. And this woman was a mother. Granted, not a single mum. But this woman said, let me just give you a reality check on what is going to happen in your life. You have no idea of how much childcare costs really you are going to have, right? Not just in terms of nursery, but you're a single mom with a big job. So you have no idea how much babysitter time you're going to want or need.
Yeah.
You might need a lot and want a lot, or you might actually decide that you don't want to be in your big job anymore. And therefore, you might want to get out of it or go part-time, right? It is not a decision you're going to be able to make because you don't know what comet is about to hit your planet. And so this woman decided, obviously, to stay where she was. And actually, it's been the best decision for her. And I don't think the man was doing anything wrong. He was giving her. He looked at the numbers. He gave her the right advice based on the numbers. Yeah. But he didn't understand the life.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
And so I sometimes think it's these things that are missing.
Okay, amazing. And that ties us nicely. Elisabeth, thank you for that. Thank you for the segue, because that ties us nicely into, you alluded to it, life goals, right? So can you explain, because obviously I think by the time this episode comes out, it either be coming to 2025 or be in 2025, right? And that's when everybody's excited to, plan their goals, New Year's resolution, right? And so when we were talking about life goals. What is actually life goals for people that don't know what that means?
So it's anything that you dream of. So it is your dreams. It is the life you want. So we call it a goal. You can call it a dream. And it's the vision that if everything goes the best way possible, this is all that you want to achieve. It's the house you want. It's the family you want, the wedding, the travel break, the career change. It's when you want to retire and what that retirement lifestyle looks like. It is all of those put together. It isn't just what things look like for the next 5 years. It's what you want for everything.
Yeah. And what's the importance of, defining your life goal? I think it's important for people to understand, because I guess people would maybe think, like I haven't thought about my life goals yet, but I was like I was starting to note down what I want to do, like health goal, the typical health goal, financial goals, but actually life goals seems like a more interesting one. I want to understand why that's important.
I think it's really important because it's you designing your life, right? And it's you making a conscious choice about not just the things you want to achieve, but also then in part how and when you want to get there, right? Because there is a bit of a reality check that perhaps has to happen when you, let me exaggerate slightly to make a point, want to retire at 35 and have a yacht by 40, like a whatever crazy Bezos kind of lookalike yacht, whatever. And you want to have a family with 5 kids and whatever, right? So whatever that looks like for you, that is the life you want. That's amazing. But you need to understand what that looks like holistically, because if not, you might never achieve it.
Yeah.
The way I always describe it is it's like rocking up at an airport, sort of thinking and hoping you're going to go on holiday.
Yeah.
Hoping you're flying to Beijing, but actually you only get to Berlin.
Yeah.
Because you never planned for Beijing, right? You packed the wrong stuff, you didn't save enough money to actually get there, etc. It might still be a great destination, but it certainly wasn't where you were hoping to get to in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's why we look at this. And it's really hard to think about some of these things because they are much longer term. They're not your holiday, at Christmas or next Easter. They are the longer term things.
The other side is, though, a lot of people have started thinking about it in terms of manifesting the life, and having the mood boards or the manifestation boards, and that's what this is, but actually with numbers. So it's actually people are already doing it and already have the ideas in their head. Even from the age of 15, 10, people know what the life that they want, and obviously this changes over time. But at every point, you know what you kind of want life to look like, or have a rough idea of some of the things at least. And it's really important to know that, to, like you said, you're thinking about your fitness goals or maybe your finance goals. Those are the more shorter term things. But if you don't actually think about the longer term ones, how are you working towards those?
Yeah, yeah. So how does somebody kind of I guess define a life goal, deconstruct it? Because it sounds like, let me not say difficult, but I think that there's an element of course, it sounds like a bit of a dream. So how do you kind of walk that back a little bit?
I think it's about sort of sitting down and really trying to break it down one bit and step at a time, right? And then it sort of adds up, and you can then start to, I almost think about it as a bit of a puzzle piece. You decide, oh, actually, am I putting that puzzle piece here, or does it go there, etc. So that's one thing. The second thing is some of these things do come somewhat in stages, right? You are unlikely to retire before you have a family for most people, right? So there's certain things that there are certain categories, if you want, and then there's certain timelines that are somewhat standard. And I'm not saying everyone needs to lead the same life or does, but there are certain big life events that may or may not happen that you can define as a goal, right? And I'll use the kids example. I think the average cost of having a kid in the UK is £223,000, something along those lines.
Over their lifetime, is it?
Over their 18 years.
Wow.
And that's without,
holidays, presents. It is just the basic
school,
course.
etc. That's just
Probably
the basic.
going to go up.
Soon. And it is.
Yeah.
But you know what? If you're planning a family, if you're planning to have 5 kids, that's a reality check. That's
crazy.
That's over $1 million that you're going to need. And that's the average cost. So again, yes, I understand things can look different.
Yeah.
But it is one of those things that you then need to just understand that you will possibly be making certain sacrifices.
Yeah.
Because if you're then also planning, I don't know, the 3-month trip around the world with them when they're 6 years old, well, that looks, a little
expensive.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think
expensive.
it is a sort of thinking about, it's sort of thinking about those kinds of things.
That is crazy. Thanks for sharing that number, right? And so you kind of alluded to it a little bit. So life goals have costs. Can you talk a little bit about how that works, like in terms of, you know, when we're setting our life goals, why we have to kind of think of the costs of those life goals?
So it's really important with each goal you have that there is always going to be levels. There is always going to be, you know, that you can either go basic, premium, so economy, premium economy, first business class or first class with a flight. And then the same way you can do that with any of these goals, you can scale up or scale down these goals. It is possible for everyone to have all of these goals. It just depends on what level you want. And it's important to define them so you can work out actually what is possible, what is realistic, and what do you actually want when you actually put them all together?
Yeah.
What are your priorities when it comes to this? And it's not very easy for people to actually define this. And so people do need a helping hand in working out what those look like.
And I think you sort of hit the nail on the head by saying it's very rare that you look at it holistically. So there's calculators out there that go, oh, cost of a house and how much you're going to need and how much you're going to need to pay in mortgage, right? Or your retirement calculator. And oh, by the way, you should have so and so many thousands,
That's very
right?
true, yeah.
But it's always for one. And life doesn't work that way, right? So the basics of compounding, essentially where you put your money into something and then the interest grows and grows and grows and helps you grow. The earlier you start, the longer you then have in it, the higher your gains are going to be. So retirement's a great example. If you start thinking about retirement in your 20s, you're only putting aside a couple of £100 a month.
Yeah. If
you're like, oh, you know what? Let me look at this in isolation and only start thinking about it when I hit my 50s, right? And I have 15 years to go. It's completely unrealistic to be like, you're going to need to put a couple of £1,000 away this month just to achieve the number that, you know, we're supposed to achieve. So it's this moment of sort of really looking at it, and it is scary, but more holistically up front, and then making some of those tweaks and adjustments to go, okay, right, I'm not going to leave myself out to dry, you know, hang myself out to dry for the really long run because I am already even just putting 20 quid, 30 quid aside.
But it's also knowing that, right? It's having that information, which that's part of the issue and why I'm so passionate about it. This information hasn't been available to everyone. You're not taught it at school. If you are more wealthy, you have more access to financial planners, financial advisors. If you don't know this, you're not working towards this. And that's the biggest problem. People are living their day to day and going, oh yeah, I'm trying, I'm saving. I know my next goal. It's the wedding or it's the holiday, but then forgetting, like Liz says, about the pension.
But there's also, sorry, I'm going to do my Nicole Kidman thing just because I always do. We find it really hard to think about ourselves in the long run. Right.
Yeah,
so I'm sure you've heard this.
Yeah.
But this is how like the brain works. And we do really sort of think about this even in the app and try to sort of debunk some of this. So just take a moment. I want you to imagine. I can't really use Nicole Kidman because I want you to imagine. So Denzel Washington.
Okay.
Right. He stood right there. He's what now in his 60s, 70s?
Okay.
Say older.
Whatever.
He might be older,
He might be older, but he's certainly not a young man anymore. I want you to imagine yourself at the same age, stood right next to him.
Okay.
Yeah? And I want you to just sort of go into yourself and go, I'm sat here at my age now, all good.
Okay.
Now, when you thought about Denzel Washington and your future self, one part of your brain lit up.
The same part of your brain.
Okay.
The same part of your brain.
Yeah.
When you thought about you sat in your chair right now, a different part of your brain lit up.
Okay.
So we actually find it really hard to connect our now self to our future self.
Yeah.
It's as if we're thinking about a stranger, right? You are essentially saying to yourself, I'm putting money aside for Denzel.
Yeah.
Not for me, right? Because, you know, it is so disconnected in your head. So it's sort of bringing these things forward and making it a reality and helping people understand that is how your brain works. So it's totally okay and normal. But with that knowledge, hopefully you'll be able to go, okay, I can override this. And
That's
therefore,
interesting.
it's fascinating.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. And you know what's interesting, right, is that I think with like, I like what you're saying, Nitika, of like, in terms of, think of like, I don't know, premium economy, first class. I've never flown first class. So,
Neither have I.
Yeah, I've not experienced it. But like, I do like that because I feel like if we go back to the kids example that you brought up, Elisabeth, right? Yeah. Like, even having kids and, there's so many decisions that the amount of kids you want to have, 2, 3, 4, 1, type of schooling.
Yeah.
I've been having a lot of conversations with like my friends on, is it going to be private primary schools? Is that affordable? Is it worth it? Yeah. Private secondary school, grammar school. We're having all these kind of conversations because there is essentially a cost to it, right? Yeah. And how that can be different. So it's, we definitely do not think that far. And the other thing is actually, that's just, like you said, one piece of the puzzle, right? That's just the children. What about my retirement? What about, I don't know, how many holidays I want a year, or what's if I want to fund the business, or what's if I want to buy them a house? And there's a lot.
Yeah. And what we find is actually a lot of life goals come at the same time. Yeah. So it gets really overwhelming for people, and a lot of people don't know where to turn. And that means that they don't necessarily achieve everything they want and need, because it's all coming at the same time. You're just dealing with your day-to-day, and then everything just feels too overwhelming.
Yeah. And we're going to talk a bit about that, because that is very important. I do feel like there is a bit of analysis paralysis with money.
Oh my, yes.
Definitely,
so
right? Like there is actually almost too much to do if I really think about it, right? Like from budgeting to saving to investing to pensions. We were talking about estate planning, right? Just before even that part, like there's almost seems to be too much sometimes. So in terms of the conversation with like, for people who, they're in a couple partnership, how can they kind of have that conversation about, life goals? Because I think it's just as important, not just about yourself individually, but you as a couple.
So I always say you've started in the right place, right? You've started with the shared goals, the shared vision of where you want your life to go. Now, the great thing about being in a couple is you share certain goals. It is totally okay to also have your own, right? So a great example of myself is I'm the one who started a business, not my partner. Now, have we had financial conversations about it? Yes, we have had to, because I am foregoing income, regular income, right? And things still need to happen. So, but it's okay to therefore have these discussions about the goals. Only then do you have the conversations about the mechanisms to achieve them. What often happens is that people talk about the mechanisms to achieve. Are we joint account? Are we whatever, budgeting together? Are we? And what happens is they ignore the conversation about the goals, and they also ignore the conversation about how they deal with money. Yeah. And then by not doing that, things start to feel unfair, and they start to feel like you're not playing on the same team, and you're going in different directions, right? If you're able to always come back and go, no, we are on the same team, playing towards the same goals, and it's just a question of, the mechanism not being the right one, we can get back on a good page in this book, right? If you feel like you are fundamentally in two different books or playing on two different teams, then you have issues.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it's important to be on the same team, because if you have shared 100%. Life goals, how, like you said, right, like in terms of running a business, that's difficult, right? It's no different to, let's say, somebody who's working full time say, okay, now I want to work part time. Okay, what's the impact of that, right? Like,
sort of thing.
Exactly, right? Does it mean that, the other partner has to contribute to the pension? Does it mean something else?
I love the fact that you said that, because that is such a good way of thinking about it, which most people don't even know. And that's the sort of things we're highlighting to people, that actually, if one partner isn't working, is the other person contributing to their pension? Yeah. Because it makes such a difference longer term.
People don't like contribute to the pension anyway.
So it's that education of the difference, because actually women are left with almost only 20% of what a man has in a pension by the age of 65, because they haven't always fully contributed to the pension, which is insane. You end up with 1/5 of what a man has in his pension pot at 65.
crazy.
Yeah, and women are way more likely, as you say, to play the caregiver role, to go on the extended maternity leave, etc. Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
We're not just thinking about just the maternity part. We're thinking
the
about
impact
actually
on-
what you missing by not also investing in your pension, right?
correct.
Because we always do, because we do have I think we're, as a society, I think we are comfortable having a conversation of, okay, my partner's off for the year, I can cover that, but
Yeah.
we don't think about beyond that.
yeah.
We haven't had that
Exactly that.
conversation yet. Yeah, so I'm glad that we're having that conversation, because I think it's very important, So going back to life goals, we were talking about, the emotions that people can kind of have with that, right? Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, so emotions are so important when it comes to all of your finances. I think it's the moment actually to go, money and finances aren't logical. And let's just take a moment to actually say that, because the truth of it is, as well as money being a tool, it does hit our dopamine center. We get just as much pleasure from it as you do from chocolate and a lot of other things that we could mention, which we won't. And so because you see it as both, there is a lot of emotions around it. The other big part about this is your relationship with money is set from such an early age. It's set by the age of 7. So your money habits, your money attitudes, which are the emotions linked to your money, are set from such an early stage of your life. It is set from your formative years because of how you've seen your parents react with money. It's set from, say, attachment styles as well. So you have an actual physical response when it comes to money. When we talk about your brain, it lights up parts of your brain. So the dopamine hits. It's an addictive thing, but it is also lighting up the same part of your brain as a Swiss Swiss Army knife. Yeah, so it's lighting up the same part of your brain as a Swiss Army knife because it is a tool. So it's amazing the impact that it has on your brain and your emotions as a result.
Wow.
I think for me, the really interesting thing that sort of it took a while for this to set in, and I know this sounds really, really daft given what we do, but the whole thing of money attitudes are set by the age of 7. Now, take a moment and go, they were also set for your parents at the age of 7.
Yeah.
And their parents. And their parent. And it goes back and back and back, right? So there's almost these, and it's not impossible to sort of change your attitude and change your thinking and change your behaviors. But it requires work. It's not easy, right? So it's very easy to sort of see these stories being told intergenerationally about money, and therefore the same sort of behaviors coming through.
Yeah.
And it sometimes, that for me is a fascinating component.
When you think of it like that, you're absolutely right, because it's just being passed down, isn't it? What you're taught.
Yeah.
If you're experiencing, like you say, your parents talking about money a certain way and handling money a certain way, that's being passed down to you, and those beliefs are just going to continue being. It's like almost like Chinese whispers in a way, isn't it?
I mean, for me, a great way of thinking about it is if your parents educated you, you're more likely to educate your parents because it was normal. Your children. My apologies, right? But that if it's a normal practice, and not all these attitudes and behaviors are bad. So I am trying to highlight a good one. It's not like all of this is.
Yeah.
So there are good things if you have healthy conversations about money in front of your children. It's okay.
It's going to be fine,
right?
Yeah.
And
but if you have
they
negative
will
ones,
exactly right. So I find it fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating. It is very fascinating. So if somebody, obviously 2025, right? Big year for a lot of people, and it's not the only year. We've got other years. When I like to talk about goals, I like to not just think about 2025 but beyond, right? But for 2025 focusing, how can people kind of, what's a simple way for people to think about breaking down some of those life goals, into something manageable in 2025?
So I have read a book recently, which I love, which is the 12-week year. So I'm going to challenge everyone to say, don't think about the year as a year. Break it down into 12-week chunks. Why? Because it adds a level of urgency. If you're like, I've got a year to save, say, £5,000, you're suddenly going to be like, oh, I've got ages. If I
Yeah,
go over
true.
my budget this month, it's okay. I've got another
Yeah.
11 months to sort it out. But if you break it down into smaller chunks, you're going to feel more urgency. Every day, every week is going to have more impact.
Yeah.
So firstly, break it down into small goals. Be really realistic about what you can do. Help find your ways of helping yourself in terms of making it as easy as possible. Goals are great. You can lose momentum. So one, you have to see the moment of feeling like, yes,
Yeah.
I've achieved something, which will keep you going on that. And then I think the other part is start with small goals. Focus on a few things to start with and achieve those and then continue.
Okay.
And then the other thing we say also is let people know, let your inner circle know
Yeah.
what your goals are, and they will help support you along the way, but also help you keep accountable.
Yeah,
for
that's
it.
true. Yeah,
It's exactly the same with a weight loss goal or
Yeah.
a fitness goal. You know,
Yeah.
if I say to people, I'm going to run a marathon this year, I have no shame in saying that, right? But then people will go, have you signed up?
How's
You know,
the
you
training
say,
going?
how's the training
Yeah,
going? Oh,
yeah,
you know what? And I came
yeah.
across this really cool podcast, or it's called
Well,
Couch to 5K. That's what you know, whatever it
Yeah.
is. They will then help you because they know what your goal is. So there is actually research that says if you've shared your savings goals, you are more likely to achieve them.
Yeah.
The one thing I will add to this is it's not just about breaking it down. It's also about building in the little moments of celebration.
Okay.
Like,
I like that.
if you go and you diet, right? And you say, I'm just going to lose all of this weight in 1 month, right? You are going to starve yourself. And then you are going to probably binge it at the end of it.
Probably, yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
all of that amazing hard work goes completely out the window. So it's, you know, it is much better practice to go, you know what, on a Friday, I'm allowed to eat a cake.
Yeah.
Whatever that is for your money, whatever that equivalent is, go do it. Go build it in. Go build it into your budget. Go build it into your savings plans. It's totally okay to have those little moments of like,
Yeah, yeah. I love those tips. And it's so, you know what's crazy, right, Nitika? I literally just bought that book because I had another guest tell me about it. We didn't actually talk about it on the podcast. It was just offline.
Yeah.
And tell me about it. I was like, what's this book? So I've just added it to my, I bought it. I've got it at home. I haven't read it yet. So I'm excited to
I
look at it.
absolutely love it
Yeah.
because I think it resonated so well with me as an idea of what this means.
I think the other thing for me is you're not only breaking down your overall goal
Yeah.
into small bits. So let's do a really simple example, right? £3,650 is what you want to, what you want to save for next year. That means you are putting aside a tenner. No, 100, 3,600.
A day.
She's the mathematician, so she always gives me this look whenever I try to do mental math.
Oh no, it's because you always look at me like, have I got it wrong? I was like, you've got it right. I don't know why you're looking at me.
got
So
it
this
right.
one for me was like, I'm pretty sure I got this one right. And then it was like, so you're trying to put away a tenner, right? And okay, that to some people is a lot, right? But it's also for many, it's achievable. So if you for some reason miss a tenner for one day, it's okay. You can then make it up with 2 5s the next day, right? So it's then a 15 and a 15. Whereas, as you say, if you're like, oh, it's now December 29th and I said I was going to save all this, where's that money coming from?
It's true.
And you'll have made progress. And I actually, the other big part about this, when it comes to your goals for 2025 and beyond, is be kind to yourself. You aren't always going to hit the goal all the time. Even if you get 90% of the way there,
brilliant.
that's winning.
Yeah. Way
That
better
is
than before.
absolutely
right?
amazing.
Yeah.
And it's that 1% every day makes such a huge difference, and it's being consistent.
We do this exercise when we do certain workshops, and it's reminding people what they've been a beginner at.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to just share 3 things that in your life you've been a beginner at.
Money.
Yeah.
Definitely. I was not an expert at it. I wouldn't even say I'm an expert. I was still saying I'm learning. Money definitely is one. What else have I been a beginner at? I want to challenge myself here. Ooh. I would say
he didn't know the tables would be turned.
Yeah, I didn't. I would say probably the podcast.
I was going to say
I
that.
would say the podcast because I wouldn't, if I was younger and you said to me, Atto, you're going to, technically I'm like a public speaker. You're going to be, I would be like, no, that's not happening. So I'll say 2. Money, public speaking. 3. I don't want to be boring. Beginner at.
Yeah.
Something like a new hobby or a new skill or something that you picked up.
I don't have a third one. I can't think off the top of my head.
You'll have done a sport at school or something.
Learned a language.
Language or
No, I'm not great at
cycling
languages.
or...
You done any hobby?
Oh, my hobbies are anime.
Yeah, but you started that at one
That's
point.
true. That's true. Yeah, true. Yeah,
Right.
anime is a beginner. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But let's use podcasts.
Yeah.
Because when you first started, that first podcast, the number
Cringe.
of followers, but again, you've said cringe because you look back at it, you've watched
Yeah.
it again going, oh my God.
Yeah.
There was things you got wrong, the sound, the lighting, none of it probably worked as well as it did
Definitely,
now.
yeah.
You didn't have the same structure as you would in a podcast. You didn't know what would work for the audience or what wouldn't. All of those things you learned along the way.
Yeah.
You had some things that you had to tweak, some things that you just had to learn. And at each point, every mistake or everything that went wrong, you
Yeah.
learned from.
Yeah.
And
That's true.
And
it's
your confidence has grown.
That's true. Actually, now that you say beginner, design as well, because I designed my Instagram posts.
Yeah, there
If
you go.
now, if you see some of my design, you'd be like, "Oh, a designer did that." My thumbnails, video editing. Actually, sorry, I'm bringing out a lot
Yeah,
of
like
stuff.
loads,
Yeah, that I
But
forgot. Yeah,
It's one of those things that,
Yeah.
and the fact that you said money makes you one of the very few people.
yeah,
Because for some reason, most people go, I've learned a language, I've done the sport, I've, posted on Twitter, whatever, all of these things. And then they go, but there's different expectations for money.
Yeah.
I should
Yeah.
know it. I should
I
just
can't
get it.
fail.
Yeah.
yeah.
And actually it's this moment of, no, it's okay. It's like everything else. You're a beginner and you're going to make mistakes. The great thing is normally you don't go in,
Yeah.
betting the house on it.
Yeah.
You start with 10 quid and then you add another $5 or another 10 or, when you start getting more comfortable,
Yeah.
that money grows.
Yeah. I actually I'm going to ask you a difficult question here. Right? This is a difficult one.
Was this one that was not on the prep?
Yeah. it's just kind of naturally
No,
came
go
as
ahead,
part
go
of
ahead.
it, right? So the advice around speaking to people, I love it. But with money, you know how people can be,
Yes.
right? We can be quite
Yeah.
nervous about it, scared, embarrassed about it.
Yeah.
Whether it's saving, I think with debt, getting out of debt, I think it's even more
Yeah.
people are like,
Yes.
oh, I'm not going to tell anybody that I'm going through this, right? So how can people kind of, start getting comfortable talking to their friends and family or trusted people about those kind of money goals where it's very difficult it feels almost quite personal to you.
You want to have a go?
Yeah. So again, start with a small group of people, even just one person that you trust. I appreciate it is really, really hard.
Yeah.
And you don't have to start with specifics. You don't have to say numbers. You can just say, I have a goal I need you to help me towards. Okay. I am looking to save. Just the same way when and a lot of people will do this in the new year of, I have a weight loss goal. No one goes, how much do you want to lose?
Yeah.
Or what's your weight now? No one goes to you like, what's your weight now? It's just, as a society, we know that's probably not the right thing to ask.
Off limits.
In the same
That's
way.
off limits, yeah.
In the same way, no one's going to go, how much money is in your bank account now? Like, you can say what the goal is or what you're working towards because all of your money goals are for a reason.
Yeah.
They are working towards a life goal or a goal of sorts that you have. It's not just, I want to save X amount. It's, I really want to work towards this goal. Yeah. So you're centering it around your life goal and saying, this is what I'm trying to work towards with my money. And actually, you'll find that people are supportive. But I totally 100% agree. People are so nervous about talking about money. Yeah. And actually, what people will find is actually you opening up opens this other door for them. Yeah. Because everyone almost has that moment of relief of, oh, I want to talk about this too.
And I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
And there's some really fun icebreakers that, again, we sometimes use. One of them is, and I'd love for you to answer this again.
Okay. Cool.
If there was a knock on the door right now, so knock, knock, and you opened it and money was stood outside, who or what would you be looking at?
Ooh, that's a very interesting question. I think before you were going to finish your question, I was like, strong, powerful. That's what I was thinking. Straight away. Yeah. That's a specified person. Like an actual person.
Yeah, you can see whatever.
Money. That's an interesting question. I just think a figure that's strong or powerful, but nobody in particular. Yeah.
So do you want to know something interesting?
Yeah.
We've asked this to multiple people.
Okay.
And over 60% see a man.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And what's even more worrying is if you ask AI, it's not 60, it's more like 99% see a man.
Okay.
When it comes to looking at who looks after finances.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because that AI has learnt from society.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
It's really fascinating.
Damn. You asked me some interesting questions. I mean, maybe you should interview me. Wow. Okay. Thank you. No, fantastic advice on that, because I do with money again, having this conversation really, hopefully it will help people become a bit more comfortable, discussing it with close ones.
If I may, really, the one thing I would say is if you have somebody opening up to you, so if you're not the person who's actually approaching but being approached, curiosity, care and kindness are probably the three things.
Okay.
Just be curious. Tell me how I can help you. What is it that you want me to be doing for you? How often would you like me to be checking in? Is there something specific? Whatever, right? So ask these open questions and sort of let the other person take you to where they want, and then just be kind, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
because it's tough. It is like if somebody's coming to you about that, like it's past, like this is personal.
But it also means that they want that relationship to grow, right?
Yeah,
so actually, for me,
exactly.
it's an invite to deepen your friendship, relationship, whatever the constellation is. But it's an invite to build real connection.
Agreed. Yeah. Okay. So going back to life goals, how does that translate into a financial plan? Right, I'm interested to hear about that, because when we were speaking, you were telling me 1 in 3 people have a financial plan. Is that correct? What about 1 in 3 people?
General stats say 1 in 3. Actually, it's probably lower.
Okay.
But yes. And what that looks like is what financial advisors and mainly financial planners do is look at your life goals and say, actually, look at them holistically and help you work out longer term how to achieve all of that. So work out the timeframes, do your projections of your income, of your expenses to help you achieve those. And that's why a financial plan is really important in terms of actually going, when do I need this money? What are my goals? And when do I need to try and get there? And so I think that's why it's important, because it's not only important knowing all your goals, but when you're trying to achieve them all, really helps you decide whether they're going to happen, because you know what you need to work towards and when. And again, it comes back to what we were saying of, right, how much does this look like? What seat in that airplane are you going for? When are you going for that? That's the parts that having that financial plan helps you do. And actually, it's really interesting. If you have a financial plan, you're 43% more likely to achieve those goals.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that's almost like the next step from it is knowing your goals, knowing when you want to do them, is then what are my mechanisms for my money to achieve those, right? So what are the products? What is the time horizon, and therefore what is the kind of risk I'm able to take when it comes to my investments? And therefore what are my underlying assets? How am I diversifying, etc. Right? Yeah. So these are then the mechanics, if you want, that if you know your goals, if you know when you want to do things, you can then start to go, okay, how does this translate into me actually maximizing the money that I have by by investing it or by making it work for you.
Yeah. And it just shows the importance, right, of why you need to define your life goals and have your financial plan that supports it. Then you can understand why you're doing what you're doing, right? Why you're investing, why you're putting money into a pension, why you're saving, right? Because I think without that, is there any real motivation for you to change or to work towards any of this?
It's anchoring your why.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why are you not paying? Or why are you not going out and spending all of your paycheck every time you get
I mean,
it?
a lot of people are. Maybe this is why they are.
Yeah, because they haven't anchored their why.
Yeah.
And, you know, where we're talking about your money attitudes, your money mindsets, and your money behaviors, if you know your why, you're more likely to be motivated to change them.
Yeah. Yeah. Life goals versus financial goals. What's the difference if people are wondering? Is there any difference between them or are they the same thing? I was just curious myself about, is there a difference between them?
So unless your life goal is to make a lot of money, I would say all of your financial goals are linked to a life goal. Yeah. Everything that you want to do with your finances is very much linked to the life you want. And so I think they are hand in hand the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I think flip that and just go, whatever the life is that you want to lead, it's going to cost you money.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that. It's
Right?
going to cost you something.
But it sounds crass to call them financial goals because we sort of, there's something about
it's icky now.
It's icky, etc.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go, but reality is if I want to retire at 55 and I want to travel a month of that, I'm going to need to think about that. Right? And the only way I'm going to be able to do it is if I set enough money aside early in order to make it happen.
Yeah. So I was reading, right, according to Forbes, and I think this is quite important for people because, it's one thing setting the goals. Everybody's going to have energy in January. We know that. Probably people have energy now, right after Christmas. So I was reading, so according to Forbes, 8% of people ditch their New Year's resolution by February, right? So we talked a lot about, the saving example. So for example, somebody could, set themselves saving £50 every month and then by February, that's kind of done. I guess, from a financial goal perspective, why do you think people struggle to stay consistent and, achieve those goals?
I think this is a multifaceted question, right? And I actually think those resolutions don't just hold for your money goals, they hold for all of your goals, right? So they're your health goals, they're your fitness goals, they're your all of that.
That's why the gyms are so busy in January.
And why they lock you in with a subscription for 12 months. So I think there's I would break it up almost into a couple of things, right? The first one is you're really motivated. So you're going to be like, I want to be this person, right? This is the person that I'm going to be. I'm going to be an investor, a saver, a whatever. And then when you see yourself not actioning that, right? Maybe once, maybe twice, you start beating yourself up and going, but I'm actually not that person that I thought I wanted to be, right? So there's a whole thing in your head that goes on from, it's almost like you start questioning your identity, which then means you're not motivated, etc.
Yeah.
And I think a big part in sort of thinking about how to perhaps look at and solve some of these things is by putting in place certain, call them hacks, right? So it might be your 12-week plan or year, right? It could also be, if we're talking about a saving or an investing or some sort of other money goal, it's about sort of going, okay, this is what it's going to be every week. And that's just going to, direct debit, standing order out of my account, either once a month or once a week, or I will be rounding up and that whatever is rounded after all of my payments also goes in there. So it's sort of automating that. That's one of the hacks, I guess, to start sort of building or getting over the, how am I not going to be part of that 80%?
Yeah. And I think it is just knowing, so the question of why is it, why people don't do it is because one, after the motivation, if you haven't seen the wins or some of the wins instantly, you're not going to be motivated to keep going.
It.
Which is why, you have to have those wins. You have to break it down into, realistic small wins that you can see to one, help build that confidence that you are that person it can be. And also there is a dopamine hit to this. If you can tick it off the list and you're like, yep, I've done it for this week, then you feel like, oh, I can do it next week. And that momentum builds and that habit builds as well, because it is about building a habit. They say it takes, is it 3 months to build a habit? So if you're doing it daily or weekly, you're going to get into that habit. And it's where you're not consistent that people are likely to fall down.
Yeah.
So it's just take them as small bite size, make it realistic, and then do it consistently for a bit rather than go all in.
Yeah, I agree, because I think sometimes we do set ourselves a target that's too big. I remember, this is going to be an embarrassing story. I remember I set myself a target of like, I want a 6-pack. That's so funny. But, you know, I'm sure a lot of young people want it. Yeah, everybody wants it, right? Right? So, you know, I think actually that's almost too hard of a target, because you're going from somebody who doesn't have a 6-pack to a 6-pack. It's almost like, even if you do it for 10 days, you don't have it, you're like, is this coming or not?
It's never going to happen.
Right? Yeah, right. So you just kind of it's whatever, right? So yeah, I do feel like that motivation part of it is very, very quite important, and getting that reward is very important to be able to kind of sustain yourself and for you to understand that it's kind of worth it in a way. But then investing is a tough one, because this is why people also don't stay invested, because they don't see, you're not going to really see rewards in the first 5 years probably, sometimes, if you're sometimes.
Yeah, I think you can. And again, it's about reframing what you're expecting to see.
Yes, okay. Yeah, true.
So it's about, with the 6-pack, so you weren't expecting to see the 6-pack straight away. Like, you know, you knew that there'd be packs along the way.
Yeah.
the one pack.
The one pack first, yeah.
And same with the investments. You know, you can hear about people like doubling their investments. Know that actually even making 2-3% when you first start, take that as a win and go, yes, this is great. Point, and it's about that to start with. And even with the savings, you're gonna like, oh, even if you've saved £1 today, woohoo, let's take that and know that you're working towards a goal. Again, it's that being kind as well, of being like, one, being realistic, tampering your expectations, but being kind.
There's another reframing that I loved, and this came directly from the life and pensions industry where I started my career. But it was somebody who said to me, every Friday when you go to work, it's for your future self, because we're supposed to be putting around 20% into our future, right? So he was very clear. You walk into the office on Friday, everything that you get paid today just goes directly into your future. So I thought that was a really interesting, and you can do that in terms of like the last 2 hours of the week, or the first 2 hours of the week actually are for my savings goal, or for my whatever goal, right? So you can almost sort of think about it in a slightly different way.
That is so interesting. So every Friday, the other 4 days are for today, the Friday is, I like that. That's a great way to think about it, because you're segmenting it almost in 2 different ways, right? Yeah. Huh. So interesting. Okay, so this is a big question, right? So I was reading a paper by Ipsos on behalf of money and pensions. So they were kind of trying to identify, like, you know, it's like behavioral science and money, and so they identified, which makes sense, good levels of awareness, knowledge, and skills are necessary to make effective financial decisions, but it's not enough, right? No. So it's not sufficient, because many people may not always act on the knowledge, and they might prioritize other aspects of their lives over finances, or short-term impulses over long-term benefits. So, you know, of course, again, looking into 2025, many people may want to start developing positive money habits to achieve, you know, again, a savings goal. So let's say somebody wants to commit to, you know, saving £10 a month. What steps could someone take to successfully create this habit and, you know, follow through?
I think I mentioned a couple in the last one, but it's the first thing is automation, right? How much of this can you de-friction.
Yeah.
I don't know
I like
how
that.
I don't know
Yeah.
how
Barriers
best
of
you
entry.
could, how can you just almost not see that money
Yeah.
so that it goes directly from your paycheck, or from that money hitting your main bank account directly into wherever your savings account is, or whatever your investment account is, right? That's one. The other thing that I find really useful is actually something called habit stacking.
Okay.
Habit stacking is, at its very, very basic, you will brush your teeth twice a day. I hope, right? Most of us.
Yes.
Most of us brush our teeth.
If people are wondering.
Yeah.
Wow.
Most of us brush our teeth twice a day, right? And actually, now this is perhaps a silly example, but you could listen to, I don't know, a money podcast, or you could, I'm giving you an example of habit stacking. What could you do in terms of a savings goal? You could actually say, you know what, every Friday before I go out to the pub, that's when I, transfer that money across, or that's when I sort of check whether
interesting,
so it's just sort of stacking the habit onto something that you're already doing.
Yeah.
And I'd like to add to
like
that,
that.
It's planning ahead. So like we said, you want it frictionless, and actually finding a plan that makes it frictionless. There is so much out there, especially in the world of money, that is built in a world to help you. Things such as Roundup, is great. And so actually having a plan and actually doing some research into what tools are available to help you is really, really important. Because if you are doing things such as, say, every time you make a payment, the rounding is going into this savings account, you're not even going to notice it because it's going to be 20p here, 5p there. And suddenly, before you know it, it's added up to the amount that you're looking at. So find the tools that really help you achieve your goals, so in a way that you don't even have to think about it.
Yeah. So staying on the topic of systems, right? So, in that same paper that I read, there was, conversation around, people not having that kind of mental capacity to start thinking about their money, because ultimately it's like sometimes there's a bit too much choice in terms of, if you think you've got your money in your bank account, what do you kind of do with it? So they're kind of prioritizing like short-term needs, so like, bills over like long-term things like saving or investing, right? So what other systems are there that can help people really think about, managing their finances in a more simple way? And then again, thinking about them reaching their goals.
So I think to start with, there's something called the 50-30-20 rule, which Liz has already started mentioning, of the 20% investing in your future self. Start looking at the 50% is in your need expenditure and the 30% is in your want. If you start looking at your world and seeing, right, what does this look like? How can you where are you in terms of that? Can you achieve that? That will start giving you a framework to say, hey, okay, am I doing that? Am I working for the now as well as working for the future? It is so hard. Yeah. And, we call it the intention action gap. You know what you need to be doing and you can't, partly because of time, partly because you're overwhelmed. And it's just knowing that there are tools there. Yeah. So this is a framework, but there are tools there and apps there that are there to help you. Okay. We're in a world where there is now information and people to help you as well. It's being able to ask for help, which is really important. People lose out on 47k every 10 years by not getting advice. And we're not even saying go and get paid advice, but just even friends, like you said, start those conversations. Yeah. So it's about that, I would say, to start with. Some of the other mechanisms you could use on trying to do that bit is having accountability circles available to you to try and go, right, am I sticking to that? And actually always centering it around your why, your life goals. It's really important too.
No, I would concur with everything that she said.
Yeah, appreciate it. And I think it's very important because the system stuff is, I think it's so important it's almost like you take away the managing of your money away slightly. I know before we mentioned, rounding up, we mentioned direct debits. I think something that's worked quite well for me is having several accounts. I have several accounts for different things.
The other thing is actually your credit card,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So not everybody knows this. You can ask your credit card provider to take the amount that you owe them out of your bank account on the day after your payday.
Okay.
Right? So you actually can decide.
As in change it.
You can change the date.
Okay.
And, you're much more likely to have money in your account and
Yes,
therefore
at
not
the beginning,
not
yeah.
feel like you're in a sticky situation when it's the start of the pay cycle versus the end. And so that is something that, again, systems-wise, a lot of people do ignore.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is a lot of people don't think about the systems.
No.
So we think about the goal,
Yes.
right? And we sort of go, I'll even break it down into whatever. If it's 5,000, I'll break it down into however much I need per month or per week or whatever. But then they never translate that into the systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? They never go so far as to go, what is the direct debit, the whatever, the other tools, etc. And it's almost about going and saying, maybe spend a bit more time focusing on that bit.
Yeah. And it's the planning bit.
Yeah.
That is it. It's like doing that research to go, hey, what are you planning for? Just in the same way where we talk about the marathon and the training goals, you would have a plan for a marathon of how you achieve that. And you'll have done the research into the shoes that you should be wearing, or the right way of running, or the right
gel.
food, or the fuel to have. And it's the same thing with money. Yeah. There is an element of research. There is so much out there now to say, right, what are the best techniques? What works for you? Personally, for me, one thing that I found one piece of advice I was given is actually, if you get a pay rise, don't use it. Pretend you don't have it. So actually, we're at the time of year where a lot of people have had their pay reviews or are having them in January, February.
That's a very good point. Yes.
If you're lucky enough to be at the stage where you're not stretched and you have the ability not to use that pay rise, work out how much of it you just don't need to see. Yep. It could be all of it, it could be some of it, and just never see that. Have that automatically go away into your future. I used that whilst I was working, and it just really, really helped me.
Yeah. It's important, actually, and very timely. You're right, because that conversation, I'm having that conversation at work, and I think it's that conversation of, your pay rise and then your bonus. And I think there is definitely that temptation to be like, ooh, the bonus, we're going on holiday this year. I think there is that conversation, and then it's like you say, you're almost no better off, because every year that extra that you are getting, you're just spending it. Right?
And there's that view, and I think there is that mentality of, I worked really hard, I deserve to use this. And that's true.
Yeah.
And that deserve to use it can work in two ways. I'm not saying put all of it away, but what I am saying is work out how much you're comfortable putting away. Because you've never seen it before, you're not going to miss it.
In the paper as well, there was mention in terms of creating that auto enroll for pensions, it made it easier for people, because they didn't have to make, a lot of choices, which I think it makes sense, because even when I think about myself, when I got into pensions, when I was working part-time, it wasn't a big part, but the only reason I had money in there is because I didn't decide it. If I decided, I probably wouldn't have not had any money in there.
So I remember, because I started my my career in the life and pension space. I remember friends of mine educated at a very good university, maths, economics, etc. They were phoning me going like, why should I enroll in a pension? And I was literally going, it's free money. I mean, your employer is literally offering to pay you more as long as you give up a tiny bit and put it into your pension for the future. And so that was when we started, and yes, we are now showing our age. You had to opt in. That's now no longer the case. So it's now just automated. And yes, it has had a huge impact on how people are thinking about their pensions, and the fact that just way more people have them.
Yeah.
But it's also fascinating, if I may, because I don't think many people really understand why this is happening, right? So when pensions first came about, and we're talking, I think they were actually invented in Germany by Bismarck or the like, so my heritage, no, genuinely. When they first were created, people lived
Till their 50s, I think.
like a couple of years, handful of years after they retired, right? We're literally talking a handful, maximum 2. And there was 8 employees in this like system working for one retiree. Now it is 1.5 person for who is working for every retired person.
Wow.
So just the system no longer, like the state pension system can no longer deliver what it used to because of aging demographics, right? That's a fact of life, and it's the case across all of Europe, right? So there is more of an onus on the individual to sort of go, I need to take ownership of this and I need to do something about this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad that's happened because it really helps, right, people to do it because it's so important.
It is.
At the end of the day, right, to have that financial control for yourself.
Yeah.
And Nitika, did you want to say something? I don't know if you want to add to that.
We can say actually what the current pension is at the moment. So most people don't even know this, but at the moment it is £250-ish pound a week that you're getting in your pension. So if you're thinking about the state pension, most of us couldn't survive on that. And that's why it's really important to engage in your pension longer term, because we all know what we want as our life for the future.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is the state pension at the moment. It will be even less by the time we get to retire.
Yeah.
Every year, the retirement age is kind of going up. And we just kind of want to make sure that people get the retirement they want. And they can only do that by working on it now.
Yeah, yeah. Talk about frictionless. On the flip side, it's it's become easier to spend, right? Especially with contactless, that's making it a lot easier. So how, what's the impact of that? And also for people thinking about in 2025, thinking about wanting to spend less and feel more control, what are the things or mechanisms that they can kind of do to, work on that?
Yeah, so I think actually now with technology, it's become so easy to spend.
So easy. It's
way
almost
too easy. And when we're talking about friction, there is no friction.
There's no friction.
There is Apple Pay straight away.
Yeah.
If you put something in a card, you don't even have to put in your credit card or your debit card details. They're just saved. Off you go. So it's become so easy to spend without thinking. You see an Instagram or a TikTok reel, you can buy it off Instagram without having to do anything.
You can buy it with Klarna.
Yeah.
So you're not even spending the money
your own
today.
money. Yeah, and then owe it later. And so I think some of the great, a tip I would say to everyone, and we say to our users, is actually have a cooling off period for yourself. Leave something in the basket for 24 hours, come back to it, see if you still want it. If you can, get rid of your card details from any of these sites so that actually, even if you have to get up and go get the card from your wallet, that is a bit of friction too.
Yeah, it's so important because it's like, especially Black Friday. Black Friday is gone, but I just remember like I was getting bombarded with so many emails and like pretty much all these websites now. Even if you put something in your basket, they're now reminding you.
Yeah.
Oh, you've forgotten this. You've forgotten this. Do you want this?
It's nearly gone. We're in the last couple.
Yeah.
So the FOMO, and especially with post-Christmas sales, January sales, they're everywhere. And actually, it's really interesting because you have FOMO playing at you. And then the other thing is actually some of the deals that we've been seeing, we've now been seeing for over a month because of Black Friday. Black Friday started, I would say, on the 1st of November. I had my first email about Black Friday on the 1st of November. We've seen all of these deals. Things that I had seen then being like, I don't need this. Because I've seen it non-stop for now 2 months. I'm now like, oh, maybe I do want this.
I really want to know what it is that you're going to want and that you're going to buy.
And it's just like, I don't need this. I think the most ridiculous, I've seen something like an outdoor piece of furniture. I'm in a flat with a balcony. I don't need any outdoor furniture. It's middle of winter. I don't need this.
Call me before you decide to hit the buy button.
Well,
okay?
I'm not
I will
going
remind
to.
you of this
I am most
conversation.
definitely not going to, but it happens. And, these
Yeah.
are the marketing tools people use. It's just like eking it to you slowly. So what you first know is you don't want or you don't need. Because you've seen it so many times, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe.
It's crazy. I think when you don't have a chance to think, then you're almost gonna act on impulse, right? Like if you, like you say, if it's just okay, you see something, you can Apple Pay, you don't have a chance to okay, looked at the price, okay, I'm not into my car. Do I really want this? It's just so much easier. Like that even on Amazon now, they have almost 2 routes to buying. Now you can just buy immediately.
Yeah.
Right, your card details store. Okay, you just buy it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it can be quite tough, and I think that reducing spending is tough. It can be a bit tough,
The other thing I would say is, again, because it's so easy to buy, it's really hard to keep track of how much you spent each month.
Yeah.
And actually, sometimes if you are looking to look at this as something you're working on, maybe don't leave it a month to look. Let's set a weekly task of looking at how much you spent so you can review it and course correct should you need to, because it's really easy to forget what you bought last week.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you both, how were you both able to improve your behavioural money?
We both thought really long and hard about this question, because we were a bit like, it almost was quite hard.
Yeah.
And I think it sort of goes back to perhaps some of the family stuff that we're, the attitude, etc. So I'll put my hands up and go, I was very lucky. My father taught me about lots of things when it came to money.
Okay.
Number one, he was also a bankruptcy lawyer. So one of the things that was very much drummed into me as a child was the companies that I deal with have failed because they spent more than they took in. So a very basic rule in life is make sure you do not spend more than you have coming in.
Okay.
Right. And if that is something you've heard from a very young age, you're sort of like, okay, I've got it. Right. Like, so on a spending side, I struggle to come up with something. On the investing side, though, it's been very interesting because as we've grown, as I've grown, as we've learned more, there's been a lot around sort of the biases and that sort of behavioral science side of things and how we think about loss aversion and all of these sort of herd mentality and all of that kind of stuff. And that I've definitely learned a lot about myself, about sort of when I hold on to something, when I don't, what I might buy, what I perhaps might not buy, etc. So that's probably where I've been able to improve some of my finances.
Okay.
And how I sort of make decisions.
Makes sense. Yeah, investing is a tough one because there's so much going on in the psychology of that.
Yeah,
so
there is.
And even now, me as being an investor for a while now, even now, there's some days I'm just like, what do I do here? Yeah. It's tough. Oh. It's very hard, right? Like the world can play tricks on you at times if you're not careful, right? So yeah. What about you, Nitika?
So again, with the spending, taking it back to childhood, I came from a family that didn't have very much, and so we really questioned every time we spent, and so I was always very careful with my money. I've actually had to spend a bit of time working through the scarcity mindset and going, it's okay to spend and it's okay to buy quality. It's okay to, treat yourself. I think about things 100 times before I buy them. Yeah. And so I have that. But again, with the investment pieces, that's where I've really started looking at it and saying, is it herd mentality? Do I want to be in crypto just because everyone else is? Loss aversion, I've probably not suffered from that as much, but I probably hold on to things a bit too much.
Okay.
Or have an anchoring bias where I will overanalyze everything to the nth degree before I buy something or invest in something, and then not necessarily update my views based on new information as much. Yeah. So it's really important knowing investment biases. Like, they're not all bad, and some of them are there to protect you, but it's just knowing which ones impact you.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the behavioral science? I'm quite interested in hearing about that and money. Yeah. What does that actually mean, and talk about how that kind of impacts us as well. I think you talked about some loss aversion, as an investor.
Yeah.
Can you talk about, just that as a general, like behavioral science and money generally?
Oh, there is so much psychology around money. It just, as we say, it stems from such a young age that it's impossible not to see a lot of that behavioral science when it comes to it. It comes from as in-depth as your attachment style. So you've heard about relationship attachment styles. Ironically, they probably work in the same way with your money as well. You've got your money profiles. So what are your money attitudes? Do you see as money as something giving you freedom? Is it a tool of power? Is it a way of showing love? Is it seen as security? There are lots of things where you think about money. Some of the examples Liz has given in the past as well of behavioral science of how our brain reacts with money. So seeing ourselves in the future versus now, all of this is kind of coming through from the behavioral science of it, and it's forming your habits. It's showing in your attitudes towards money as well.
Yeah, I think for me the key thing is we seem to think about money as coins or notes or numbers.
Yeah.
And it never is, right? It never is. There's this layer of, call it fog, right? Which is this emotional layer, which is the stuff that doesn't make entire sense. So I'll use loss aversion as an example. So what is loss aversion? Loss aversion is the fact that we experience a loss substantially more emotionally than we experience a gain. Yeah. So this is not even in investing. If you find a tenner, right, on the ground, you'll be excited. You'll be like, yeah, great. Yeah. I can go whatever, treat myself to something, right? If you lose £10, that loss will stay with you and you'll beat yourself up about it much longer than that gain of, I found a tenner, right? So that's the sort of behavioral science side that just permeates all of it, right? From the spending to the debt, to the saving, to the investing, right? All of these habit forming techniques that we've talked about, all of that is also somehow related, if you want, to the larger sort of behavioral science field.
Interesting.
And we actually also call it like an iceberg.
Okay.
So what you're seeing is the numbers and the spending, say. So spending when you're stressed, or how you feel about investing, whether you're confident or not, or whether you're risk averse. But there is a whole iceberg of emotions that come beneath it, that are under the surface, that you kind of have to really spend some time working out where did they come from, because they've been there for years and they've been forming on top of each other, and all you're seeing is the tip at the top, which is based on all of these things that we've said.
I completely agree as well, and you're absolutely right, Elisabeth, that in terms of money, is not, we don't always see, like, if I think about like retirement, right, or let's say if we think about a millionaire, I think, let's say, people wanting to become a millionaire, I don't think they think about just the money in their bank account. I think it's more about what's the lifestyle of a millionaire. Maybe for them it's freedom. Maybe they're traveling to wherever they're traveling. Maybe they have a certain asset. Maybe they live in a certain place. I think that's what they're thinking about, not just, okay, my bank account's got like 6 zeros in it now.
So it's what you can do with that, right? Which is why when you said financial goal versus life goal, it's actually what you want rather than what that money can do.
So let's talk about Aila Money, right? How will it help to close the wealth gap?
So we are looking to put a personal trainer for your finances, which is an app in everyone's pockets, in every woman's pockets, to help them get more confident and in control of their long-term finances. And the way we do that is by letting you know of your current situation, helping you calculate the cost of your life goals, and then helping you achieve it with hyper-personalized education and action plans, and then support of humans as you need it. So there is a marketplace of humans who understand you that are there to help as well.
Amazing. So it's going to help with a lot of the conversation, and it takes out a lot of, having to use. Because I remember, Elisabeth, you were saying like calculators which is true, right?
Yeah.
Like you've got maybe just a compound calculator, then you've got maybe your retirement calculator in one place, and it's not, consolidated into one place. So this will be very useful in helping people determine that.
I think the way we've purposely considered ourselves a personal trainer, so we call ourselves sort of the money PT, because we genuinely also think that a personal trainer, right, if we move you to the gym, is probably not dissimilar. Right? If you are going to try and run that marathon next year, start weightlifting, whatever, you will have a place where you are and you will know where you want to get to. And there is a difference between this and this. And you are going to need a path. That path may be linear, but for most people it's not, right? Also, when it comes to their fitness journey. And you might get halfway through just using a digital PT.
Yeah.
But then you might go, actually, you know what? I'm really stuck and I'm not able to get whatever, that fourth part of my six pack. Or I'm not able to lift more than whatever, or I'm not able to get past the 30-kilometer mark. So I want to have a PT. And that's where then the humans come in. Yeah. And it's sort of really combining that education, the insight, the actions, and to an extent also it's that accountability partner. It's the good cop and the bad cop that's going, hey, you said you were going to do this. Have you done it? It's all right. Don't beat yourself up, but we do really need to get you back on track kind of thing. So it's trying to sort of provide that solution for your budgets, for your savings, and for your investments.
It's needed. I mean, a lot of people will need that and they'll need that support. I think having somebody as a support that can help you is so much more fun, is so much more enjoyable, so much more motivating than doing it solo, to be honest, right?
And we understand money is overwhelming. So we are trying to break it down by allowing you to think about your life goals, consider what options you want for all of them, and then saying, okay, we now know your life goals. Let's give you the education on the products, on the budget, the saving and investing. So, your life goal might be to buy a house and save for that deposit. We'll help look at your budget to see how you can save for it, what timeframes you can do that in realistically. We'll then show you the investment products. So you're not just saying you need to invest, but you're saying, right, you're investing for this goal. Here are the products that can help you, whether that's an ISA or a LISA. We'll then give you the personalized education for that goal and then handhold you on actually how you go about starting those pieces.
That's amazing. So when is it available? That's the question that people want to know.
January 1st.
Okay. So
right
I think,
in line with New Year's resolutions.
Wow, that is good. Okay, so people will be able to download it and
absolutely,
start using it from January 1st. That's amazing. And is it on everywhere? App stores, both app stores, yeah? Okay. Cool.
Apple and iOS. Okay. Or Apple and Android. Sorry.
Apple, Android, yeah.
Apple and Android.
Yeah, okay. Okay, that's amazing. It sounds fantastic. And I guess if people want to, find out more, read more about it, where can they kind of,
So our website is probably the best place, ailamoney.com, AILA money. We also have an Instagram and a LinkedIn tag if you want.
Yeah,
and that's
please,
at Aila Money in both instances.
Yeah.
So those are probably the best places.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, if you want to share yours in case people want to reach out as well, ask questions.
Yeah, so
we will...
Do you want us to share them on here?
Yeah. Please do,
Off you go.
So mine is for LinkedIn, Nitika Vyas, and you'll find me there. My Instagram is pretty boring, but it's Nitika87, giving away my age there.
Absolutely. So I'm Elisabeth Prager. I think it's Prager on, I don't know, LinkedIn.
The amount of people that don't know their LinkedIn is so funny.
You'll find me
to be
under
fair,
Elisabeth
LinkedIn doesn't have a smart...
no, you can change them.
Oh, can you?
Yeah,
so I think I am Prager at the end.
Oh, gosh, I didn't know. I've just got my, whatever they gave me, I didn't change it.
And then I have to say I'm a bit strange on Instagram. I probably had... So my mother was more active on Instagram
than both of us.
social media than both of us when we started Aila. So while I have an Instagram, it's probably not where you're going to find me.
That's fine. If they can find your LinkedIn, it's all good, right?
And you can find us on Aila Money.
Yeah, Aila Money. People will reach out on Aila Money.
Yeah, I think that's
No, I really appreciate you both, just sharing your wisdom, sharing your experiences, sharing your tips, because I think it's very important, especially in 2025.
Oh, so important.
It's going to be... It's 2025, so I always find, when it's like 2020, 2015, these years round years are interesting. I feel like it's going to have that extra energy. So I think, helping to guide people, especially at a time where I feel like money is definitely still a problem for people. Cost of living crisis is still happening.
Absolutely.
For sure. There are more gaps to address, as you mentioned, the wealth gap. I think in the future, I think there's going to be probably a debt gap probably get bigger with the way, with the way it's easier to spend, unfortunately. So, having that guidance is so important. Do you have any final words for watchers and listeners?
Be kind to yourself, start small, and keep going consistently.
Yep.
Build the systems. Right. So it's not just about your goals. It is about taking the time to really build the systems around them. And then, as she says, be kind, be compassionate, and be curious.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, have a good 2025. I wish you both a good 2025. Thank you so much for featuring on podcast. Wish you great luck with the launch of the app. I am looking forward to seeing the reception and feedback. And again, appreciate you both featuring on the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the podcast. Have a great new year if you're tuning in then. And we'll see you later.